edition of the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. As we begin our fourth season here on the Review, we hope you've enjoyed the first 3 years of insightful and hopefully knowledgeable interviews with a variety of stars and celebrities and coaches around the world of lacrosse. We start the fourth season, getting ready for the spring of 2023 by bringing you an interview with John Galant, who is the current assistant coach at the University of Denver. But more importantly, John is a 14-year career veteran of the NLL and is the current color analyst for TSN, the Canadian Broadcasting Network, for the NLL's games across the country and some stuff you'll see on ESPN. John is a science teacher by trade, but we'll get a chance to talk about being a little bit more of a demure-sized defenseman and playing in the NLL, why he stuck inside the world of indoor box lacrosse instead of maybe picking up a stick and going outdoors. But mostly he's going to talk about perseverance and what it takes to be an athlete at the level that he played. A world champion in 2006 playing with Gary Gait in Denver with a great organization there in Colorado. And I think it'll be a really interesting and insightful interview. John is a very personable guy and just a fun guy to talk to. So we'll bring that interview to you in just a couple seconds. So stay tuned and hopefully you'll spend some time with us this season. And for all the guys in back, we'll be back with John in a second. Welcome back to the start of the fourth season for the Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We are with one of the nicest young men you'll ever want to meet, assistant coach from Denver, John Galant. And John's a Brantford guy who grew up in the, obviously, Ontario province. And our connection locally is you went to Lake State.
That is correct. It's up in the UP, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And just watching the news this morning on the way into DU here today. Heard the upstate Michigan and the Upper Peninsula got about 8 inches of snow there last night.
Yep.
And so even being this far away from winter. So but yes, spent my 4.5 years there up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and loved every second of it.
Well, let me just go back briefly because we kind of start in the beginning. Obviously, Brantford, you're a box player. You had a great, successful career playing for Colorado. You got drafted by Washington. Was it lacrosse first and hockey second for you growing up?
No, it wasn't. It was hockey and baseball, growing up. Okay. And Brantford, Ontario, about an hour south of Toronto. It's the home of Wayne Gretzky, and so it's outside of. Obviously being a Canadian, town where everybody's going to play hockey, when it's also the home of the best hockey player ever, there's a little bit more emphasis, right, on hockey. And so I was a hockey baseball guy, and it was about, 7th, 8th grade. And, Brantford is located right next to, Ohsweken, Ontario Six Nations Indian Reserve, and that's where I played, my junior A lacrosse. And so, my father had, a co-worker who was the sister of Gaylord Powless, and who's a famous, one of the best box lacrosse players ever in Canada. And so in that 7th, 8th grade range, she kind of convinced my dad that, hey, your son should spend the summers, playing the great, the national pastime of Canada in lacrosse. And so hockey was definitely first, and lacrosse, became second. And, that was kind of my path always, until my college years. And so, that was kind of the route I took.
When did baseball fade in that early high school?
Baseball got replaced there in 7th, 8th grade. It was, standing out in center field, picking the dandelions there didn't seem very exciting anymore, and in the hot sun. And so, baseball got replaced with lacrosse when I was like 7th, 8th grade. And so, hockey, hockey's year round, right? And even at that time, right, was year round. And so going to essentially the same arenas you would in the wintertime, just to play to play box lacrosse was, an easy transition. And so, I was fortunate we had some really good teams, for me to watch. The Six Nation Arrows in 92 won the Minto Cup. And then you had the Six Nation Chiefs come in, with, they had Paul Gate and Tavares, and they won three man cups in a row. And so right when I made that transition, I was living in a community that had high level lacrosse being played. And so it was an easy transition, because of, the similarities, but also, probably most importantly, an easy transition because you had the best players in the world at that time playing, in my hometown.
What do you do as a coach now? What do you remember now coming to the sport, to the level you played at the 7th and 8th grade? Some would argue it's a little bit late. So there is catch up. You
Right.
back to your youth days and think, this is kind of what I did. Obviously, the adulation of looking and watching with the world-class players that were in your hometown is certainly a help.
Right.
But what did you remember back to any of those things that you use today that might be helpful? Because it's obviously,
I learned, I learned right away. I was a defenseman. I learned right away that, and I learned right away to a plastic stick at that time was referred to as Tupperware, and I was given a wood stick, a Logan Special, and what I learned, immediately that, to your point, I kind of still use today is there are technique things of how to cross check, how to hit, how to run the floor, stick protection, and the stick always kind of being up here by your ear, and how important that is to ball movement. But, to be honest, the thing I learned, that's probably the most important that I learned early, and I learned from watching the game and going to games with my dad and my sisters was the ability to compete, and trying to teach that now to college guys is, how to persevere, right? How to spend time on your own, working on your game. And then, when you're in practice and when you're competing in live games, once that scoreboard's on, the scoreboard's on, right? And as Coach Brown says, and learn how to compete and how to get better. And I think that's, from what I learned early in my career, and what I learned from my teammates with the Six Nation Arrows, and my teammates with the Victoria Shamrocks, was probably the most important was self-development, right? And how to be a good teammate, but how to compete, both personally, and then how to compete as a team.
So at high school, you had up to Lake State.
Yep.
A little bit of hockey. Did you continue to play lacrosse in those college years?
I did, yes. I would, spend, I was a double major, at Lake State. And so, I would spend the academic year there. And then I would travel back and play for the Six Nation Arrows in the Ontario, lacrosse league. And we had one Minto Cup final and 2 Ontario finals. And so, played with, some great players and some guys who are, still, Landon Miller is on the management staff there with the Philadelphia Wings and the NLL, and so played with, some fantastic players. But, my hockey career, my junior hockey career, really saved my lacrosse career. And, I was, I had no place to play. I'll be honest with you. I was, 16, 17 years old, and I was playing junior B lacrosse. And, I actually tried out for one organization twice, a junior A organization twice, 2 years in a row. And I got cut both times. And after I got cut the second time, it was a hockey teammate of mine who was playing lacrosse for the Arrows. It was Landon Miller. And he said, why don't you come try out with us? Like, we haven't done anything yet. Why don't you come try out for us? And, I tried out. It was a walk-on, made it, and spent 3 great years playing for one of the best, organizations in Canada. And, that led me to that success with that team, led me to the National Lacrosse League. And so, my hockey career was kind of ending. But it was my hockey career and the relationships I had in hockey that saved my lacrosse career. And so I was very fortunate kind of to be at the right place at the right time. And, as hockey ended, lacrosse took off. And I've obviously been involved in lacrosse ever since.
They made a indoor lacrosse movie that were reminiscent of Rudy. There's 4 letters in John. There's 4 letters in Rudy. Make it easy on the marquee. I get that part. You went to Lake State to get an education degree, right? You wanted. Did you always want to? You are and were a teacher.
Yep.
Science teacher.
Correct.
Am I correct?
I was a science teacher. I was a kindergarten teacher and 2nd grade teacher for about 13 years. And then I taught high school science for 3. And so, I went to Lake State and got, like I said, double majored, and my background was in science. And, my last year at Lake State, I was finishing my 2nd degree, and I got an invitation to try out for the Washington Power. And so they had Paul Gate and Gary Gate and Paul Cantabine and Josh Sims, and a long list of American, not only Canadian guys, but American guys that were fantastic lacrosse players. And so my connections and my success with the Arrows led me to that. And so, I spent my October, and November of my last year at Lake State commuting to Detroit, and then flying from Detroit to Chicago to Baltimore to try out for the Washington Power. And I was fortunate enough, through hard work to make that. And, my NLL career lasted about 15 years, from that Washington Power, and then transitioning out here to Colorado when we moved. And so, I was very, fortunate in hindsight, and in answering your questions now, thinking about it, I was kind of in the right place at the right time a couple times in my life, and it has worked out, for me quite well.
You haven't taken necessarily the traditional role and road through the patchwork. It's been an interesting, pragmatic approach to this, right?
That's right. It was never drafted in junior A, never drafted in the NLL. And I think it goes back to your original question about what I took from my early years. I was aware of what my skills were, right? Like, I don't have the hands of a goal scorer, right? But, and I'm 5'11", and on a good day, 160 pounds. And so, I just, from, probably taking it, definitely taking it from my mom and dad and my older sister and younger sister, just, developed a work ethic. And, when given an opportunity, just try to work hard. Right. And knowing what my role was as a player, and trying to do that well, and that unconventional path of not being drafted ever, to driving 5 hours from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan to Detroit so I could catch a connecting flight to Baltimore. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Right. And so, it's as you say, an unconventional approach, but one that, I'm fortunate I took, and I'm fortunate I had family and coaches and friends to push me and encourage me, and to make me aware how lucky I was to have the opportunities that I was having.
John, you got a science, you're a teacher.
Yep.
When did you figure out that you might be able to make a living at this? And I say that because when you hit the NLL, we've interviewed a bunch of the PLL Hall of Fame guys who were in that club sport in that late 90s, when it was just before it got into the MLL.
Yep.
And guys weren't making the money that meal money in the NBA was a salary in the MLL sometimes.
Yeah.
So my point was, when did you figure out that this could be a career and make a living at it?
I think it was several years in, right? And to your point, about salaries, my in it would be the fall of 2001 and in the spring of 2002, my salary was $4,200. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 teammates across from Towson University, and it was the best. I loved every second of it.
Right.
And our franchise moved here, and it's owned by Stan Kroenke, and who owns the Avalanche and owns the Nuggets. And when we came out here, the Avalanche were very successful. They just won a Stanley Cup. And so we're doing community events, and you're doing it with Carmelo Anthony, you're doing it with Patrick Waugh, Joe Sakic, and you're sitting there going, well, we got 17,000 people here for a Mammoth Calgary Roughnecks game, and you guys got 17,000 people. And what I'm making in a year, you might spend on a meal on Saturday night. But you don't think about that. Like, that's not something that you would ever process. What you thought about was, these are the guys, these are NHL guys, NBA guys, or, these fans are asking for autographs. And you're like, yeah, come Monday morning, I'm going to be teaching, how to add and subtract single digit numbers in a kindergarten classroom. And, so it's a whirlwind, for sure. But it was, you get to the point, probably about 3 years in, and, I was playing lacrosse in the summer in Victoria. And it was like, I'm not going to make a living off of playing lacrosse professionally. I need to do something, I want to do something. And, I was fortunate to find an elementary school here in Denver that was looking for a lacrosse coach, and to coach their middle school team. And, I was happy to do that. And I started substitute teaching at that school, and then went back to get my teaching license. And I thought, if you were to ask my mom and my dad what they thought my career would be, being in education would have been the last thing they would have said. And
Why?
I was not by any means a great student. And so,
Okay.
listen, I loved Lake State, but I also knew I could get into Lake State. And there were many schools I was probably not going to be able to get into because of my academics. And so, it was, ironic that I got into education as a profession, but, I loved it, and what I loved about it was it's the same thing I love about coaching, right? It's you're teaching youth, and whether they're 5 years old or whether they're, 22 years old. And I know from a kindergarten perspective, I was teaching kids how to read, write, and count, and pretty useful skills that you need in your life. And, and I was teaching them how to be, young people. And so, I was, in hindsight, I was fortunate to have some great coaches. I was, very fortunate to have 2 great parents. And, I just look at it through that lens of giving back to young people, the lessons that I have learned, and whether it's through academics or through sport, trying to teach them, how to, develop skills, but, also how to have some valuable lessons in life, that they can rely on, as they continue to grow and develop.
John, in a day and age when I grew up, almost every coach was a teacher. That's not true today.
No,
It's
yeah.
probably the numbers the federation says that probably 40% of the guys coaching today are classroom teachers.
Right.
60% aren't.
Yeah.
You take, as a teacher, you take education classes that I never took.
Right.
And if teaching is about education, coaches don't have that background.
Right.
You have to, I would think, have a step up on the ability to transfer information less language and all the other things that go with education that the rest of us might not have. How important is that in your curriculum for the guys you're coaching?
I'll be honest, it's every day. That's what I do. Like, listen, I'm going to teach a guy how to pick up a ground ball. I'm going to teach, I can teach a guy, how to, try to read. Should I slide? Do I don't slide? How to pass and catch. But, it's how do you talk to your teammates, right? How do you, absorb information? How, how I got, 22 defensive players, Coach TNI. Not all of them are the same. Not all of them are going to process information the same. In the discussion we had prior to, to this talk, it's first thing I said to Coach Tierney is, he's explaining some things. I said, you got to put it on the whiteboard because I lost you 2 seconds into it. Right. This guy moving here and this guy moving it. I'm out. Right. And so, I think it's the ability to, for me, my background in education, it's my ability to present information to a variety of my players in a variety of different ways that helps them consolidate that, process it to the best of their ability and move on. And then it's also, when, when I have 35, kindergarten students in a classroom and about 3 of them, English is, only 3 of them, English is their first language. My ability to figure things out on the fly and problem solve and go, listen, there's no book, there's no manual, right, to how to do certain things, right? And so, you take that, out on the field, and I took that out as a player, like how to relax and how to calm down and how not to let anxiety get to you in stressful situations, because I've sat at the front of a classroom with 35 sets of eyes looking at you, and the majority of them don't speak English as their primary language. The majority of them don't speak any English, and I have them for 8 hours. And what are you going to do?
Right.
And so yeah, you're right. It's when I grew up, a lot of my coaches, were teachers, and so there's a lot of my background, and Coach Tierney's got a background in education as well, and we use that every day, and we don't know we're using it because we're so kind of skilled in it, or our background is so lengthy in it, but we do it every day, and it's the thing we do the most.
Let me touch a little bit on your career in Colorado. I'm not sure there was a better NLL team in that decade. You had Gate for a while. You had a bunch of guys. You had leadership in Steve, and I want to say his last name, Grubert.
Govett, Steve Govett. Yep.
Steve Govett is probably as strong an administrator in lacrosse as there is in the country. He and Steve Stenderson are now part of the World Lacrosse Board. And I think there's a lot of things that they brought to the table. And I saw plenty of games in Denver when you guys were playing.
Right.
It's hard to imagine that, 17,000. I don't think people realize just how good the numbers were. And I think it's growing. But what was it like playing in those days for that franchise?
It was the best. It was from we had a good mix of Canadian and American guys, and obviously started, like you mentioned, with Gary Gate and Gavin Prout, but we had Brian Langtree, and we had Dave Stilley and Jamie Hanford, and then we had Gavin Prout, who's now coaching in the NLL, and so we had a list, when we won a championship in 2006, and with Simsy and Jalbert, and so Denver is just such a great sports town. It's a Bronco town first, and it's struggling a little bit with that, with how they're playing, but it's also such a melting pot of people, and there's people from all over the country here, and they're gonna it can be any sport, and they're going to support you here. And so we were fortunate when we made that move from Washington, D.C. To here in Denver. Having Gary Gait at the start helps, right? And then when he transitioned out of playing to coaching and winning the championship in 06, really kind of galvanized that. And then you could see the Outlaws came in, just after that in the MLL. And so, it's a great sports town. High school lacrosse here is very good, in the sense that it's popular and a lot of athletes play it, opposed to, maybe playing football or basketball. And, having a diverse community of people from around the country, is really positive. And so for us, at the University of Denver being here, the Air Force Academy in our South, having a Division I team, the success of the University of Colorado and Colorado State at the club level. And then, probably, to be honest with you, more importantly, the success of the Vail Lacrosse Tournament, which is a field lacrosse tournament that's one of the more popular field lacrosse tournaments in the country. And it's been, a place where all these, guys, it used to be, I got the World Championships coming up in San Diego for men next summer. The Vail Lacrosse Tournament used to be where Team USA and Team Canada would come and train and prepare for that tournament. And so just the state of Colorado has a pretty unique and strong history in the game. And so when we came as the Colorado Mammoth in the National Lacrosse League there in 2002, we were just able to carry off of that. And it didn't help, or it did help, sorry, it did help. You had guys like Adam Foote, who were winning Stanley Cups, and Joe Sakic, who are winning Stanley Cups, who were lacrosse players as kids. And for them to help promote us really brought in a lot of, non-lacrosse fans to the game early.
You're a world champion while you're with the Mammoth. You are also a member of Team Canada that won a world championship.
Yeah.
I have to ask the question because it's it's sort of a thread.
Yeah.
You're strapping on the red and black for the first time with the maple leaf on the front. What goes through your head to that point? What was your experience?
How am I here? How did I get here? And with Tavares and Doyle and Sandersons and so I just always looked at it as I was confident in my ability because I knew what my ability was and I knew what my role was. And again, I think from my upbringing, I wasn't trying to be someone I wasn't going to be, right? Or I wasn't. And so it was from winning a championship with the Mammoth, from winning Man Cups in Victoria, that's what I saw, when I was going back to our original conversation of in 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, things like that. I saw Man Cups. And so within a 4, 5, 6 year span to win world championships at, representing Canada, to, Man Cups, to NLL championships, the experience was all the same. Was man, how lucky am I? And I better work my tail off to make sure our team is successful and to make sure that I can play the next day. And so I kind of always took that approach of if I had a good day, that was great. I better have a better day tomorrow, or someone else is going to take my spot. And that mentality and a team first mentality, was the mindset I always had, no matter if I had a shamrock, a mammoth, or a maple leaf on my chest.
Did you ever give thought to playing field lacrosse?
I did, when I was, younger, I did, I played, like, it wasn't big, like it wasn't popular. And so, a lot of people talk about, especially Canadians, a lot of people talk about, Paul and Gary and Tommy Marichek playing in Syracuse. And that brought field lacrosse to Canada. I would argue not really, because it did for me, and where I grew up. And then, John Grant Jr. playing at Delaware. Okay. It was really more Brody Merrill, right, at Georgetown. And, I was a freshman in 1997, right? Freshman in college in 1997. And so I would play box, and I'd play field, but it was like 2-3 weekends. And then, there was an opportunity to play, the under 19, level, and I hurt my shoulder and I had shoulder surgery. And so that kind of took that away. And, outside of that, it was, the focus then kind of remained on box, or it was more emphasized on box. But the availability now for, you have programs in Victoria, you have, Snyder's have a program in Calgary, you obviously got the Hill Academy, right? And you got Evolve in Ontario. Like, there's not even a thought of anything like that, for Canadians growing up of my age group. But it was really Brody Merrill at Georgetown. And it was like, because he also, spent time at a prep school, high school, right? And then before going to Georgetown. And so, I was kind of right at the very end, essentially, of the Canadian youth, and everybody after me, now they started playing a little bit more field and it was more available. So I loved it. As a D guy, hey, I can be on the field all the time. I played with a 6-foot long wood stick, a Logan Special, and I was taught how to slash and how to hit people in a certain way, which I always enjoyed. But I think, I had one opportunity at the under 19s, which were held in Australia. And, it was a shoulder injury, and that took me out of that. And so that was kind of, the end, until kind of now getting into coaching, both at the youth and high school, and obviously now at the college level. To where
exposure that the 2006 World Championships in London, Ontario brought to the now it's on a world stage.
Yeah.
Even in those days, there was maybe 8 world-class country teams.
Yeah.
I saw, California take the Irish on, and, a California high school team beat the Irish national team.
Yeah.
So it was still apples and oranges at that point, but it did have a change. In recent times, you kind of go from the MLL into and NLL went its own way, and now we've made, with the PLL going the way they've gone, they've made a way that you can play, box inside in the winter, you can play outside. There's a number of guys doing those things.
Yep.
PLL is suffering, I think, and I think everybody would tell you, you watch the championships and you see half of an empty stadium. Yet the NLL on TV, if you're watching ESPN Plus, of which you are a commentator, I should point out, those places are packed. So my point is there's conversations about the PLL may not be making it. Yet the NLL is a strong sport. Not only the attendance, right. TSN has done very well with the sport. I mean, it was a good move, but why is the indoor game really taken off in the last couple of years with the exposure versus what you watch the PLL now? It's like it's watching the early days of the MLL to some extent.
Right. It's a great question. I think, from my experience is, listen, I like watching the PLL, and, I like, Dylan Ward's a close friend of mine, and so he had a good month and a half, 2 months there, and seeing the Canadians be successful, and, and selfishly, seeing DU Pioneers be extremely successful, right, in the PLL. But, like, even talking to Trevor Baptiste about it, it's the box game is so exciting and fun. And what I mean by that is, it's up and down, it's, physical. I think from a fan's perspective, what Colorado did really well is they drew fans who are not lacrosse people originally. They got a lot of people to come who are not lacrosse people. and the motorbikes with the cheerleaders coming out, the hot tubs in the corner, the fireworks going off, the shutting of the lights after goals, and then making the players extremely personable to fans after the game, and it being extremely affordable, right? You can easily bring your son and daughter and wife to games, but there's portions of the game itself, the box game. Okay, that's basketball. Like, I can see that. I can see the pick and roll. I understand that. I can see, the physicality of hockey. I can, there may be a fight now and then. I can see the line changes like ice hockey. And so I think there's a piece of, from a fan's perspective, it's entertaining, the box game, from what teams do in the arena. And I think there's aspects of the box game that fans who come for the first time can recognize from other sports and go, oh, okay, I got that. And how fast it is and how competitive it is. And I think, the PL is trying that, and, I think both struggle sometimes with the seasons they're in, right? And who they're competing with, competing with the NFL, or they're competing with college basketball or college football and things like that. They're competing for markets. And, and so, I think you can see is there packed arenas? Yes. But there are some, NLL teams that do struggle, and you've seen franchises move markets, in the NLL as well. And so, but I think keeping both leagues, my only hope is that both leagues work together, and both leagues try to help and support one another, because both leagues have the same players for the most part, right? And whether Dylan Ward's the starting goalie for the Colorado Mammoth champions, and he's a starting goalie for the Water Dogs as a champion. And so, my only hope is that both leagues' leaderships can work together to develop the game of lacrosse, because I think there's room for both, and I hope there's room for both. I have a 12-year-old son who would love to play both, and so, and I have a daughter who would love to play the box game, and so that is my only hope, that between those competing in different seasons, that they can work together to develop the game of lacrosse together.
Before we talk about your current employer, and I don't want to keep it forever, but I do have this question. I watch a lot of guys teaching box lacrosse, hanging out shingles about their box lacrosse experience. And having been a box lacrosse player, having grown up in Canada playing the sport, my question, and I've asked this question before, I don't think they're teaching box lacrosse as much as they're teaching lacrosse in small spaces. Right. So my question to you is very simple. How does somebody distinguish between the two, and where do I spend my money? How do I know that I'm not being taught, lacrosse in small spaces? And I think that's prevalent in the States. I really do.
I do. No, and I listen, I agree with you, coming into, arenas and we're teaching box lacrosse, and you're like, yeah, no, that's just lacrosse inside because it's cold outside, right? That's what it is. I think, I think US Box LA and Matt Brown and Shaden Santos have started in an organization that has blossomed into a lot of NLL, Canadian NLL guys who, like me, have remained in the United States and across the country, to American American-born guys who played box lacrosse are now a part of US Box LA, trying to educate and teach box lacrosse the correct way. And so I think seeking out those groups, whether it's California to Connecticut to Texas to Denver, Minnesota, right? It's across. So US Box LA would be a starting point to see, who's doing that. For me, I kind of look sometimes right away, the nets. Do they got box nets? Is everyone got a box shaft? So they all got a 42-inch long instead of big poles. And then right away, the pick and roll game. How is the pick and roll game being kind of taught there? And, from the very basics of, like a down pick to certain things, but, I go to, are the up picks being taught? Or is everything a pass down, pick down? And, at the young levels, we teach pass down, pick down, pass down, pick down. But I look at the pick game and where are the coaches telling the players to keep their stick? That,
Fine. Yep.
right here.
Yep.
All the time.
Just what you learned when you grew up playing. I get it.
That's it, right? So we had a group of young athletes from Toronto, and Colin Doyle runs a program, out of the Toronto Rock organization, and come down and like early high school type kids, and we have a young man who grew up playing box goalie, loves it. His sister plays box goalie. They love it. And so he's been a box goalie maybe 10 years or so. And so these guys come down, they play a weekend of box and field with us. And I say to this, player who I've known 10, 15 years, and he's a box goalie. And I said, what did you notice about the Canadian guys? And he's like, Coach, everything was right here. And when they shot the ball, it was deception with their head. And they would move this way and boom, snap. And, that told, and I know they're being taught well because I know who their coaches are, but that piece of the stick being up and it's a snap of the wrist, and deception comes from eye movement and head movement, a little bit of the hand, but nothing is all over the place. No pockets are really deep and big and with whip in them, as everyone says, any whip. And so, if I'm a parent, I'm looking at US Box LA and their website and trying to find, is there organizations in my area? And if not, I'm also then looking at, outside of the easy visible from nets to sticks is the coaches, what are they talking about with stick placement and the importance of it just being right here. And because this is a skill that can translate to field box, it doesn't matter. And until you start looking at these Canadian guys who have been so successful, obviously Jeff Teat now and guys like Cloutier and things like that, their sticks are always here. Dyson Williams at Duke, they're always here, right? And they're shopping and looking and moving, and they've taken a skill from the box game and they've translated to field, and that's why they're so successful.
Last couple of questions. 2019, you get a call, I'm assuming, from Bill. John Orson leaves the program, and you get a chance to. I'm assuming you're coaching high school at the time.
I was coaching high school at the time. Yep. Yes.
The thing that hits me in part of your bio is that you and John Grant Jr. were both coaches at, I believe, Christian Valor Christian.
Valor Christian High School. That's correct.
I've coached a long time. If I look down and I see, John Galant, John Grant Jr., I'm already at a disadvantage. But my point to that is, obviously, you get a chance in 19 to make this a full-time endeavor. Yeah. You've been there since. So here are two questions. Talk briefly on your experience about what it's like to be on that staff and in that program. And then we always knew Denver could score. Right. But all of a sudden, they're starting to play defense. And it's starting to build as the monster we knew it could be, all the way back from Jamie's days.
Right.
It was one of those things. It is a hotbed. The area is a hotbed. Right. You kept everybody home just from the Denver area. You'd be Michigan, on the other hand, has one kid from Michigan on the Michigan roster because it's a national roster. So you are ahead of a lot of other places. So talk briefly to that.
Well, listen, I've known Coach Tierney. I played with Trevor. Trevor was on our team, original Colorado Mammoth team. And then I played with John Orson, him and I with the Colorado Mammoth, and I played with Matt Brown with the Colorado Mammoth as well. And so Matt, that began our relationship, Matt, myself. And then I started coaching box and field with Trevor and Matt in the summers. And so I established our relationship with them, and that relationship obviously kind of fed into with Coach T as well. And so when Coach T reached out to me, and Coach Brown reached out to me, I said, "Are you sure?" Same kind of going back to what you said, the question about, playing with some of these teams, my thoughts, sitting in the dressing room with Team Canada, are you sure you want me here? There was definitely that, going through, but talking to, Mark Miashta, who's at Canisius, and talking with Steve Govett and about making this transition. It's the competitiveness I was as a player, my IQ as a player, I had to have a good IQ because I was not big, strong, and fast. And but my background in education as well, in teaching the game, right? And so they asked me to come on board, and I've been, I was extremely grateful and thankful, and as we start going here and working together, the competitiveness of the three of us, we're extremely competitive, but we have the same values in developing players. And so, we're going to look at Canadians and guys from Colorado and guys from California. That's kind of where it began. And now it's kind of, okay, we're going to look at guys from Ohio. We're going to look at guys from Massachusetts. And we're going to look at guys from upstate New York. And we have players from, you talk about Michigan, we have players, we've had players part of our program from 34 different states. And so, yeah, we have to put in the hard work to find, the guys, and so we're going to get the Canadian, we're going to get some Canadians like Berg and Mark Matthews. And, now we have Noah Manning and, here that have helped us be successful, Tyler Paces of the world. But, I think our competitiveness, I think our the level of importance that we put into developing players, both athletically and helping them mature as young men as well, benefit us. And, listen, it's, there's nobody's won more, right, championships than Coach T. So, it's and then Coach Brown's success, obviously, from his success with Team Canada and his success here. And so we just really enjoy working together, and we really enjoy being together. And we have some of those similar character traits that I think are important for this particular team, and this particular school, to be successful. And so I appreciate the kind words about our defense. We gave up too many goals our last game. I'm going to tell you that. And so that's kind of our mindset. Like I said, I appreciate the kind words of our defense being successful and mirroring how successful the offense has been. But our mindset is, what was our last day like, and can we be better than our last day? And so, we're excited about this group. We just came back from Canada playing, Team Canada and St. Joe's. And so we're excited about the group we have. We have a long way to go, but the personality traits that we have as a coaching staff really mesh well. And we really enjoy being a team that has had success, but still has to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because we're not in the Eastern time zone, right? And, we're going to have to compete like that all the time.
It took an extraordinary opportunity for Jerry Byrne to leave Notre Dame to go to Harvard.
That's right. Yep.
Are there aspirations? I mean, the word that the inside of the world is that Matt's hanging around until, John says thank you and walks out into the sunset.
Right.
Are there aspirations for you to be a head coach sometime at some point?
To be honest with you, honestly, no. Now that could change. It obviously could change, but
you like Denver?
Yeah, I like that. My wife is from the area. I tell you what, if my 12-year-old son, if we left somewhere, he wants to be a Pioneer. My daughter wants to play on our national championship men's hockey team here. But there's never say never. But what I would say is I like teaching. And I like whether it's, it was in a classroom, whether it was with 5-year-olds or whether it was 15, 16-year-olds, I like teaching. And, whether it's now teaching athletics as well as teaching some life skills to the young men that are here, I like that. And I like being able to do that. I think some of the responsibilities that head coaches have take time away from that teaching and from that one-on-one or small group instruction. And, it's who I am on the inside. And, I'm happy with what I do because I like that teaching part. And I know my wife and kids are happy, but I'd never say never. But what I will say, like you mentioned, coaching on a staff with John Grant Jr. and, we had Lance Tillman, on that team and Pacheco on that team. And it was fantastic. But I sit right next to the head coach. My office is right next to the head coach's office. And some of the responsibilities that head coaches do that have nothing to do with the development of players as athletes or young men, I don't have desire to be a part of. And so I'm doing exactly what I love to do right now.
If you look at the NCAA numbers, they keep track of all kinds of things. Coaches under the age of 30 that get a Division III or Division II job have a 25% chance of staying past the second year.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate. And in most now the federation, we're losing kids to playing, but more importantly, we're losing coaches. We have 23 open high school jobs in Michigan at the moment. I'm a secretary of our coach association, so I keep track of the openings. And we had last year 16 jobs that had one application. And in 12 of those 16 jobs that had applications, they had never coached lacrosse before. It was a dad who took over because if they didn't, they wouldn't have a team.
Right.
So you have, in our case last year, John was nice enough to come on and was part of we have a call-in Zoom coaches clinic, early February. Yep. We had John on with Kevin Corrigan a week, yep. And we had Lars Tiffany and John Torpy on another week and so on and so forth. And this is absolutely the last question. You've made another transition to television and you're now doing, color for TSN. Just briefly, is it fun?
I tell you what, I've learned so much and, and it's extremely fun. It's extremely nerve wracking. Coach Brown says I have the face for radio and I should be on radio rather than TV, but sitting in between the benches. And I think from the perspective of as a former player, there's a lot that I can, I see and understand and anticipate. There's a lot I had no idea this stuff went on. I was a D guy back over here, right? I was with Jamie Hanford and Richie Catton and Dave Stilley, dying back here, right? And so there's so much that I didn't realize went on. And so I've been fortunate. Many of the coaches that are head coaches now or assistant coaches are guys I played with or against. And so they've been very appreciative, but it's the game. What I've learned, the guys are so big and strong and the guys have such great sticks. The only thing I ever did was take the ball, run near center like an egg in a spoon and go, here you go, Gary, you go score some goals now, or Gavin Prout, right? And these guys D guys are moving all around and they're so big and strong. And, but I love it. It is so nerve wracking because like you said, it's not my background and I'm interviewing players and asking questions and I'm like, oh my gosh. So, studying professionals, whether it's from college football or, basketball and I'm fortunate. No one has been like Greg Popovich and given me one word answers and been disgusted with the questions I'm asking. Everyone's been very nice and appreciative. And so, but I love it. It keeps me involved in the game and, it keeps me involved also in seeing the development of the game. And so, we look, just a quick, short story. We are one of the first home games this year for the Mammoth is against the Calgary Roughnecks. and Kirk Milowski is the head coach of the Calgary Roughnecks. Well, one of his sons is a freshman here, at the University of Denver. And so, I said to him, Kurt and the Calgary Roughnecks have beaten me out of the playoffs as a member of the Mammoth more times than I'd like to count. So he said, Cody, you better give me something good here, to kind of give to your old man, because that first time out in the second quarter when I got to hop the boards there and try not to rip my pants and run over and ask him a question, we better have a good one. So, but yeah, I've been, again, very fortunate and lucky to be a part of that. And I've said to many people who involved in the game to sit that close and to be in an arena like that and see these athletes, how they perform, it's shocking to me that I ever played,
Right.
because of how good these guys are.
The right voices matter. A couple of weeks, one of the couple last weekends of the PLL, I had a chance to ask one of the unit producers from ESPN.
Yeah.
I said, "How much do you miss Ryan Boyle?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, your numbers, since he has been moved out of the booth, your numbers have dropped 30%.
Yeah.
I said, "I don't know what that translates into faces or numbers or likes or clicks or whatever it might be, but
Right.
it's just in my bank account, if I lost 30% of my revenue, I would consider that substantial."
Yeah.
And I said he brought something to the game that nobody else has seemed to bring back to the process. And I've always said that I think the CBC does as good a broadcast and the way they do hockey, and certainly the way they do even Olympics, they do such a terrific job. Listen, I appreciate your time. I know you're a bit self-effacing, but you're on the Mammoths all-decade team. You've been a captain, you've been a world champion. You're obviously the self-effacing part of it I like, but you had a tremendous amount of talent, and obviously showing up on the. So for all the guys that are here in Michigan, we appreciate you spending some time with us. And this is the opening show of what should never have been a fourth season. We're having some fun with that. But this has been a really cool interview, and it's been my pleasure to have a chance to talk to all three of the coaches at Denver. So please say hi to Maddie for me, and certainly say hi to John, and tell him I had have a great what's left of the fall. John, thank you so much for your time.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you. And like you said, with some of the snow that's come up the Michigan way, please stay warm. And I had a great time and love talking to you. So anytime, I'd love to talk to you again.
Just wanted to say thank you to John Galant for joining us. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we will have some interesting interviews for you that you can kind of watch and enjoy and listen to, and check us out on Facebook. So for the guys in back, and again, thank you for John Galant coming aboard. We'll see you next week.